Eric Metaxas, Religionless Christianity. This is the title of your new book, and we're going to get into that. But I've got to ask you, when you look at the landscape out there, there are a lot of churches, a lot of pastors, and you know this, they don't want to talk about politics. They don't want to get into the fray. They're afraid, or they just don't want to offend people. Why do you think so many, though, have decided to sort of just turn away from the political?
Well, I want to be real clear. This is kind of scary, but they are under judgment. And if you go to one of those churches, you are under judgment. Now, when I say that, I don't say that with any joy. I have to say certain things are clearly wrong. Just because you have reasons for doing the wrong thing doesn't mean God will excuse it. And when you look at what happened to the German church, many good Christians, good Christian leaders, many good Christian pastors did the wrong thing in Germany in the early 30s. They regretted it for the rest of their lives. They said, I don't know why I didn't speak up. Was it fear? What? Let me tell you, if you understand what is going to happen as a result of your avoiding this stuff, you would be much more fearful of not speaking out. First of all, it is not biblical. The lie that to be political is somehow wrong has to be exposed. It's why I wrote my book, Letter to the American Church. It's why I wrote the book, Religionless Christianity, the sequel, to make clear this is not the biblical position. It's never been the biblical position. You bought a lie. We've all bought lies at one time or another. And you try to wake up from the lie and embrace the truth before it's too late. But the Lord allowed German pastors to go down this path. He didn't force them to hear the truth. God always sends his prophets. He sent Bonhoeffer. He sent the prophets in the Old Testament. He sent Jesus to talk to the religious leaders of his day. Most of them were not interested. Most of them had their reasons. Whatever your reason is, folks, this is scary. The hour is so late. If you were in a German church in 1933 and you dithered a year or two before you understood what was happening, it was too late. Bonhoeffer tried desperately to wake up the churches. I have to say that there are people sleepwalking. And I say, if you are going to a church that is guilty of this, you say, oh, it's a nice church service. The gospel is preached. It's biblical preaching. We sing hymns. We love the Lord. If you love the Lord in that way, you will speak up for those that are suffering. You would speak up for the Jews on the way to Auschwitz. Those German churches didn't. What are Christian churches in America doing today? They're ignoring what's going on outside, pretending that they have some kind of a biblical carve-out, some religious carve-out. We don't need to get political. I want to be very blunt. That's not biblical. These churches are under judgment. And actually, I've already seen it. The churches that are speaking out. And look, we're not talking about the boogeyman of Christian nationalism, which is just a joke. If you live out your faith, those who don't like it call you a Christian nationalist. That is just total garbage.
Can I pause you there? Well, I wanted to pause you there on that really quick because I think it's actually important and you're going somewhere. And then I want to pick back up on what you were going to say. And sorry to interrupt you, but the Christian nationalism thing, it's very interesting to me because for years, a lot of the people who are now saying that, they were telling Christians, to step out of, politics, separate your politics from your faith. I mean, it's been the same sort of rallying cry. And now suddenly we have these people saying, oh, you're all just Christian nationalists. Yeah. And, it feels like a very conjured up boogeyman, as you were saying, to try to dismiss any Christian and get them out of politics entirely.
Of course it is. Listen, it's the voice of the devil. Christian nationalism is the devil's term for actual Christians who live out their faith in all spheres. Imagine if somebody said to you, you need to separate your faith from your family life. You can cheat on your wife. Don't be so literal, okay? You love Jesus, don't you? Does your girlfriend love Jesus? This is sophistry and confusion. It's demonic. When people say separate your faith from what? From nothing. Our faith is to be brought into every relationship, into every sphere of influence that we have. Patriots have died, okay? Listen, most American Christians who are enjoying the liberties that we have, who are spoiled, most people in the world would do anything to have what we have. They have not yet died for these liberties. Patriots have died for these liberties. And shame on us for not doing everything we can to keep our liberties to take our Christian faith into the political sphere, to advocate for God's purposes in the Christian sphere. The only one who doesn't want you to do that is the devil, but he can fool Christians and he makes it sound religious. He never says, embrace the devil, embrace evil. He always says, no, that's Christian nationalism. You're making an idol of politics. You're making an idol of patriotism. That's like saying you're making an idol of loving your wife and your kids. Honestly, is that really the problem? I guess it's possible, but is that the problem? The problem today is that most Christians aren't political enough. We've been given this gift because of the blood of patriots to govern ourselves, to elect people who advocate for God's purposes. And we say, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do church. It is wicked and it's absolutely diabolical. And many Christians are falling for it. Many Christians are going to churches where this nonsense is being preached. And I got to tell you, it's nothing but politics by another name. They condemn being politically involved. They are themselves being politically involved by not being politically involved because they are opening the door to all kinds of evil. It all comes in through atheistic, agnostic, Marxists who are dedicated to being political. And so the church says, oh, we're just going to sit back and let them run the field. It is madness. And here's the real issue is that human beings' lives are destroyed. We're commanded to love our neighbors. If you don't advocate for God's purposes in the public square in politics because you're afraid what some big tither in your church thinks or you're going to lose some people, we ought to care what God thinks. And again, Letter to the American Church and the new book, particularly Religionless Christianity, I spell out how Germans got it wrong and how Bonhoeffer extraordinarily got it right. It's amazing how he was able to avoid the pitfalls of all of these religious idols because they're very tempting, the religious idols, and they're tempting in every generation. Right now, we're seeing exactly that. And I try to spell it out so people can really understand this is biblical. This is not just some, conservative point of view. It's either biblical or it's garbage. I mean, that's the point.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, we all know that we can't worship country over faith, right? We all know that. And nobody's really, I mean, look, are there times that I've struggled with that in the past? Sure. But most Christians, that's not what's going on. Christians are putting their faith first. We're called to do that. And it's always a good reminder to put our faith first, right? But that doesn't mean we can't love our country, be engaged. I mean, you're absolutely right that these are lies that have been created to separate people from the political process. Now, I want to ask one more thing before we talk a little bit more about the book. Looking at, as we're having this conversation, looking at what is going on in our city, right, in New York City, around the country, when it comes to anti-Israel sentiment, these massive protests on college campuses. You talk a lot, obviously, about Bonhoeffer, about the 1930s. It's really disturbing to watch some of the messaging that we're seeing come out, pro-Hamas messaging and all of that. What has been your reaction in your city to watching this chaos unfold?
Well, it doesn't surprise me whatsoever. I mean, in the book, the new book, Religionless Christianity, God's Answer to Evil, I talk about the spirit of cancel culture. It is a demonic spirit. We saw it in the French Revolution, the bloodbath of the French Revolution. What did they talk about in the French Revolution? Liberty, equality, equality, fraternity, all these beautiful terms, lies from the pit of hell. They were a murderous mob. It was a demonic spirit that took over that nation. You see the same demonic spirit in all of the Marxist revolutions. You saw it in the Bolshevik Revolution, under Stalin, Mao's Chinese Cultural Revolution. It is utterly satanic. It is at war with God and will always be at war with God's chosen people. Jew hatred is the hallmark of evil. It always arises. Why? Well, because the devil can't help himself. And so right now, what we're seeing in New York and around the country, it's just the true colors of those who claim to care about the oppressed, whatever. I mean, when you think about the satanic evil perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th, how do you not just turn away in shame I mean, imagine if Martin Luther King Jr., imagine if he, instead of leading dignified people who smell of Jesus when they walk with this dignity, imagine if he had said, what we've endured, and they did what Hamas did. And you'd say, well, they have a point, right? Yeah, they have a point. And the way they have made that point is from the pit of hell. that's how you can sort of smell the demonic. And so what we're seeing right now, to me, it's just this, in a sense, it's God's mercy to show us the evilness of evil, because a lot of times we're fooled. A lot of times Christians are fooled by these nice words that we care about racial justice. We care about, it is all garbage. The people, these Antifa protesters, BLM protesters, they're Marxists. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in God's principles. They believe in power. And many Christians have been fooled by that. Many Christians have been fooled by that through the decades, but we're seeing it now more clearly than ever. And I think it's God's mercy to wake up the church, or to wake up those who can be awakened, because there's some that they just refuse, just as in the past during Bonhoeffer's time, in Jesus' time, they doubled down. And what did the most religious people do in Jesus' time? They murdered God. That is the hallmark of the satanic, to want to murder God. They would have said, oh, we're religious. We know the Torah. We know that. Well, you knew everything except the thing that mattered to God, and you murdered God. That is the spirit of religion apart from God. And that's what I talk about with regard to Bonhoeffer in the new book, is the most wicked thing of all, religiosity apart from God's purposes. That's where the devil lives. It's a nightmare. We need to wake up.
Yeah. And I mean, I think right now what we're seeing, as you are saying so astutely there, is we're getting a clarity, right? It's never been easier to see Ephesians 6, right, play out, that there's a spiritual battle and there are people who are blind to it. We're watching evil openly masquerade itself. And this has happened again, at other points in history, but in our lifetime right now, we're seeing it. It is very clear on a multitude of issues, not just the anti-Israel sentiment. We see it on gender. We see it on a lot of these issues. And, for the Christian, it's very clear. For everyone else, it's not. And so we can kind of see that. And it's pretty alarming. But the actual title of the book, Religionless Christianity, you've hinted at it. You've spoken a little bit about it here. But talk about that title and what you're hoping people take away from the book itself.
I mean, it's a weird phrase. It's the weirdest title of any of my books, but I use it deliberately and provocatively because it's a Bonhoeffer phrase. Bonhoeffer, in the last year of his life, he's in the Gestapo prison. He writes a letter to his best friend, Eberhard Bethge. And in the letter, he says, in a sense, how has the church failed in Germany, that this nightmare has fallen upon us, that Germany has destroyed the churches in shame. Millions of Jews have been murdered. How did it happen? And he says, what we didn't have, but what we had needed was a religionless Christianity. In other words, a true Christianity, not a religious Christianity in the negative sense, but a true faith that rises up against evil heroically, that's not theologically fussy, but that says we want to stand for God. We want to stand against real injustice, against satanic injustice. If we had had that courage, which we ought to as Christians, none of this would have happened. So German Christians were mostly religious without living out their faith. And they basically said, as the trains are going to Auschwitz, we just want to praise God. We just want to have church. Shame on them. Because Bonhoeffer even said early on in the 30s that, if you don't stand up for the Jews, you have no right to sing your hymns. You have no right. Shame on you for singing hymns when God called you to speak up for the Jews. Speak up for the Jews first and then sing your hymns. They said, no, we just want to sing hymns. So what's more diabolical than saying we just want to do church when what you're doing is serving the devil in a religious way? That's where we are in America today. People need to wake up to that yesterday. If you're going to a church that's going along with this, I beg you, by the grace of God, get out of that church, because the hour is as late as can be. And I'm not exaggerating. I wish I were, Billy. I wish I were just being dramatic, but this is where we are right now.
Well, no, and it's a troubling place to be. And I think even the non-Christians who are paying attention, they're feeling it. They're feeling that something is off. You're hearing people talk about it. What is going on? The world is so off kilter. And so it's an opportunity for us to be talking to people about God and about what really matters most in the midst of all this chaos. But as we sort of march toward this 2024 election, which as the days go on, this, you cover a lot of stories and you see a lot, as do I, the chaos intensifies. What has you most concerned right now as we are heading toward that election?
The apathy of people who call themselves Christians. The apathy. God's judgment will be far greater on Christians who do not speak up and do what they can and do not recognize evil. Anybody who is foolish enough at this point to say, well, both parties have a point, That's like, at this point, it's like saying the devil has a point. It's like saying Hitler had a point. Let me help you understand. He has some points. The Hamas murderers and rapists, they have a point. Let's go over their points. If you are discerning the Spirit of God, you don't do that. You understand where you are. The apathy of the church right now is demonic. We have to understand it's like out of the Narnia Chronicles. You're asleep. You're in a trance. You need to wake up. Will you wake up? There are so many that really feel like they're justified in doing nothing. And I'll tell you something, when evil triumphs, you will know that you helped it to happen. Just as the German Christians knew they had helped it to happen. You don't want that to happen. But and to get to your point about non-believers shame the church when they see evil and they call it out. There are all kinds of non-believers or people we don't know where they are spiritually speaking, whether it's Donald Trump or Tucker Carlson or Russell Brand or Bill Maher or whoever else. They see evil, they see lies, they call it out. That's supposed to be the job of the church. And I want to say to what you said, that there are people all over this country who are maybe not churchgoers, who they see the evil and they're interested in people who see it and lead the way against it. That's called evangelism. We have an opportunity right now with the madness to bring people into the church. Say, join us in standing against these various evils. Join us. We do it because we want to honor God, because we don't fear death, because we really believe what the Bible says. Those, ironically, who are all worried about evangelism and worried about not offending people, they are losing people in their pews. Those who are focused on these things are drawing people in. So it's an ironic moment, and we'll see where it goes.
So, final big question for you here. How can America turn back the tide, right? Because it feels like it's too late in some ways. But what would you say to those who say it's too late, there's nothing we could do?
Well, right at the end of the new book, Religionless Christianity, I take us back to 1776 because I say this right now is the third existential crisis of our history. The first is the Revolution. The second is the Civil War. We're in the third now. And I get into that in the book of how that's the case. But if you had said to George Washington in 1776, hey, how's it going? He would have said it's going very poorly. The safe money says, get out. The safe money says, you can't win, you won't win. Do you get it? Read the tea leaves, George. What does he say? No, things look horrible, but if we fight on, let's put it another way, if Providence be with us, if God be with us in this cause of liberty, we can prevail. It's up to the Lord. The Lord parted the Red Sea. The Lord did miracles in our revolution. I write about it in my book, If You Can Keep It, about the miracle of the Battle of Brooklyn, where a fog descended. It was a total miracle. If not for the miracles, if not for God intervening, you lose. But guess what? We serve a God who intervenes. We serve a God who can do anything. Our job is to do our job. Our job is to fight evil. If we do that unto the Lord, we have no idea what he's going to do. And the voices that say it's over, you can't win, that's the voice of the devil. That's the voice of the devil to get Christians to sit on the sidelines to say there's nothing you can do. I want to be clear throughout history. I use many examples, but the number one at the end of this book, when I talk about George Washington, he knew that he had to fight on. There would be casualties, but it was the right thing to do. And he would do the right thing until the Lord made it impossible to do the right thing. And as a result of what he did, we are free in this country. We're in a very similar place. We need to look to the Lord. We need to fight. We need to do the right thing and put the results in God's hands. That's why I'm hopeful.
I love that. No, and we know how the story ends, right? And we forget that too often as Christians. We know how the story ends, and yet we act like we don't. We act like we're all going to fall off this cliff. And the story ends with, in a very favorable way for Christians and for the world at large. A new heaven and a new earth. And obviously I'm getting into Revelation there, but we know how that story ends. One more question for you, because a lot of people, they might be listening to this, watching this, and they're thinking, you know what, I want to speak out, but I'm afraid. They're gripped by that fear that we were talking about. What's your advice to the believer right now to motivate them to get past the fear and to speak out for what they know is true?
You should fear God. You should fear not speaking out. You should be scared to death of being silent, because God is a judge. He will not force you to speak out. But if you don't speak out, judgment will come upon you because you had an opportunity. Patriots have bled and died so that you could speak the truth. Jesus died on the cross to free us so that we could speak the truth. So we have no fear wherever we live. But we live in America where patriots have died to give us, to enshrine our ability to speak the truth, to advocate for the truth in our founding documents. So there is no excuse. You're under a delusion. You're hanging out with the wrong people. If you're hanging out with cowardly people, people that are watching their rear ends instead of keeping their eyes on God, then you're going to be full of fear. The reason I wrote these books is to exhort people and to make them understand God has called you to a glorious adventure. He will not force you to accept it, but it's a glorious adventure. You'll meet friends and make new friends who understand this stuff. And you'll say, what have I been doing all this time? I've been sleepwalking. So I really believe that we're in an extraordinary moment. And I want to say to anybody with fear, that really is the devil. Fear God, and you will be filled with faith and joy. And you need to hang out with people who will encourage that. If you're going to a church that's playing it safe, for the sake of your soul, get out of that church. The hour is way too late to be playing church. That's what happened in Germany. And when it went south, there was nothing they could do. They for the rest of their lives, they were ashamed that they said nothing and did nothing.
The book is Religionless Christianity. Eric, where can people go to grab this book and all of your other books? I mean, you've done so much over the years, just like a central place they can go.
Well, the best prices for the book, also for autograph copies of the book, is my website, ericmetaxas.com. So now I'm telling people to order from there because it's just cheaper all around. For all my books, ericmetaxas.com. That's just my website.
Awesome. Well, appreciate your time today. Looking forward to chatting again very soon.
It's a privilege, Billy. Thank you.